Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I'm Ruth Shelley, President of the Rotary Club of Portland. Welcome to our live weekly membership meeting. As our banner says, Rotary opens opportunities to find solutions for today's challenges. Healing from the pandemic, recovery from the economic downturn, and peace building as we seek racial justice. This week, we add our concern for healing and recovery from wildfires throughout the West. Our thoughts go out to those who have lost homes, livelihoods, and sadly, even loved ones due to the terrible conflagrations. The fires have been one more blow to arts and culture. Today, we hear from Brian Rogers, Executive Director of the Oregon Arts Commission, on the impact of COVID-19 on our arts and culture community and the prospects for recovery. But first, let's welcome President-elect nominee Rotarian Maria Schell for our reflection. Maria?
Thank you, President Ruth, and good afternoon, everyone. For today's reflection, I wanted to focus on education. For many of us, school has started in a very unusual way this year. And for those of you who don't know, my personal passion and career is dedicated to education. And working at the state's land-grant institution, it's focused on the access for education for all. So I ask this afternoon that we reflect on the importance of education for all Oregonians and how might we be able to become an educator in our own community. Where can you help? We have single parents trying to figure out remote work and still keeping their job while helping their kids get online for their hour a day. We have families without access to stable internet, but how can you help those families? They are right in your neighborhood. So I just ask us to ponder that and think about if you've asked your neighbors down the street if they could use a lending hand for an hour to help keep their third grader on Zoom during their time. And so I'm going to end my reflection today, though, with 3 quotes that I've had up in my office that I haven't seen since March that are related to education. The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. So I start with my fun from Dr. Seuss. The next is a French poet, Victor Hugo. He who opens a school door closes a prison. And last, one that I put up after I joined Rotary when I had learned about the work we do internationally with peace. And this is from Confucius. Education breeds confidence, confidence breeds hope, hope breeds peace. So thank you very much, President Ruth.
Thank you, Maria, for those inspiring words. If any of you would like to give the reflection at an upcoming meeting, please let us know or fill out the link provided in the chat box. And welcome to any virtual guests. Thank you for tuning in to our weekly meeting. Please introduce yourself in the chat box where you'll find a link to guest registration. We're eager for you to fill it out so that we can stay in touch. And it's September. I would like to extend a happy birthday to everyone with September birthdays. As you know, we alternate each week honoring birthdays and Rotary anniversaries for the month. Please note the names of these birthday people and reach out to one of them with a call or email. All of us could use a little extra cheer right now. Now we're going to go into a virtual table talk. In a few moments, all of us will disappear from here and then reappear in a virtual room with just a few other Rotarians. If you don't know each other, please introduce yourselves. A minute or so before you come back to this main meeting, you'll get a visual heads up. And may I suggest a topic for your breakout room? Please share what arts or cultural activity you've missed the most during the pandemic. Here we go. Welcome back, everybody. I'm sure many of you in your breakout groups talked about the fires. And with all of the fires and smoke happening in the Portland area, we've actually added a space on our Facebook page for Facebook members only to let fellow Rotarians know how you and your family are doing through fires, evacuations, and smoke. And so if you're one of our Facebook members, please drop a line to our whole group and let people know how you're doing, which I hope is well. And now, please welcome Rotarian Dan Bramsky to announce a very exciting upcoming Project 2020 volunteer opportunity. Dan?
Thank you, President Ruth. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. As you can see behind me, the Rotary Youth Center at Morrison is nearly complete. As you may remember, this is our Project 2020. And I was just recalling with the team the other day that without Rotary's involvement, this building would have not happened at all. I'm happy to report.
Yay!
Yeah.
Drew here.
Drew.
Drew is not grumpy anymore.
No.
That's right. Go for it, Dan. Catherine and I are behind you all the way.
So even with the current restrictions on construction activity, the Joseph Hughes Construction, who's building the building, is aiming for an October 1st completion date for the building and the surrounding grounds. But in order to complete the project, we need the help of our Rotary Club. And we need help with the landscape. So on October 3rd, which is a Saturday, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., we're going to have a volunteer event exclusively for our Rotary Club to help remove noxious and invasive species from the site, primarily around the bioswale. So we're going to have 2 shifts with a maximum of 10 people at each. The first shift's going to be from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. and the second one's going to be from 12:30 a.m. to noon. And during this, we're going to practice distancing. We're going to have a check-in procedure for everyone. And of course, we're limiting the number of volunteers just to keep it safe. And after you help us work on the grounds, then we're going to give you an exclusive tour of the Rotary Youth Center, which no one else other than the construction and design team has been inside of at this point. So in order to sign up for this, I'm going to post a link in the group chat here today, but then also post it on our private Facebook page. And then I believe it's also going to be in the spokes later this week. So there's only 20 spots available. Once again, it's October 3rd, and we're looking forward to having everyone out there with us. I think Drew is going to be out there leading the charge with me and some others.
Yes.
And of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know.
Would you repeat the start time for the second shift, if you will?
Yes, the start time for the second shift is at 10:30 a.m.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Drew. What a wonderful project and what a great opportunity to serve. October 3rd is my 28th wedding anniversary, so my husband is going to have a special treat. And now, please welcome Rotarian Curtis Cherie to make a few U40 announcements. Curtis?
Hopefully everybody can hear me now. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Thank you, President Ruth. On behalf of the U40 committee, I'm here today. As many of you know, the U40 committee has a goal of providing the future of Rotary's membership by recruiting members who are under the age of 40 and are up and coming professionals in their respective fields. So typically this time of year, I would be up here asking you guys for help in recruiting, but with everything that's been going on with U40, we've decided to actually adjust the start of our calendar year to that which aligns with the fiscal year for Rotary. So we'll be starting our program in July. In the intermediate time here, we're actually looking at ways that we can help supplement what we've already been doing and make U40 more effective in this 2020 COVID landscape. So one of the events that we're actually doing is on October 14th at 4 p.m. We're holding a Zoom conference for all past U40 members. And we would just like past U40 members to join us on that conference so that we can discuss what they might have liked during their experience in the U40 program, but also discuss ways that we can potentially improve and make that program more meaningful for the people who are involved in that. So if you are a past U40 member, look for our email invite. You'll be receiving that in the next couple weeks. And that date is going to be October 14th at 4 p.m. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. What a great program and a great pipeline for leadership. And now on to our program. After our speaker today is finished, if you'd like to ask Brian a question, Maria will moderate the Q&A through the chat box. And now, please welcome fellow Rotarian Delaney Delmont as today's chair of the day. Delaney?
Thank you, Ruth. We're so pleased to have Brian share with us today how the Oregon Cultural Arts is doing. A bit of background about him, just some interesting pieces. He does have a degree from the Temple University Tyler School of Art. He's got his Bachelor of Fine Arts. He's actually an accomplished artist himself, and his art focuses on relationships of people to the environment. When I've asked him what's been his biggest challenge during COVID-19, his comment was it has been implementing the coronavirus relief funding for the cultural support, which was $26 million. I'm sure he'll be telling us a little bit more about that. As a younger person, from the ages of 6 to 20, he was an avid ice hockey player. And also he has been a whitewater kayaker and has worked as a river guide, much like Mike Pendergast, a fellow Rotarian who runs rivers. But he did that in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is his home state. And while he was in Pennsylvania, he's got over 20 years under his belt working in various art programs, most recently as the deputy director for the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. While there, he implemented many amazing projects, several different types of programs, one of which was called Picture Pennsylvania, which was a statewide traveling exhibit program. He's worked on various different types of funding. And he is also, as he talks about the impact of COVID-19, going to be sharing a little bit about how we as individuals, Oregonians, can work with the Oregon Cultural Trust, because Oregon Cultural Trust has this amazing program where you can actually double your donation by donating to various cultural and humanity programs, then donating to the Cultural Trust, but then you get that as a tax credit on your Oregon tax form. So with that, please join me in welcoming Brian Rogers as our speaker, sharing about the COVID impact on arts and cultures in Oregon.
Thank you so much for that. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, okay, great. Yeah, I just wanna just follow up on the Cultural Trust donation process. You know, many of us really value culture and are missing it right now, being able to participate firsthand in a lot of the wonderful things that happen around the Portland metro area and around the state. The Cultural Trust works by you as an Oregonian can give a donation to a cultural organization. And then you can also donate to the Cultural Trust an equal amount. And that donation to the Cultural Trust comes back to you on your state taxes as a 100% credit, not a deduction, but a credit. So if you give the Cultural Trust $100, you'll get that back on your state taxes. And typically in a year, we raise about $4.5 million. And 60% of that is for grant programs. We do about 100 direct grants each year. And then we have every county and tribe receives a block grant from the Cultural Trust, which they then make subawards in their service area. And on average, those coalitions award about 450 grants per year. So the other part of the Cultural Trust is that we also take 40% of the funding that we raise each year and place it in a permanent fund for future generations of Oregonians to have access to culture. So I thought what I would do is give you like a brief synopsis of the Portland metro area arts and culture sector prior to COVID and what we're experiencing now, kind of a compare and contrast. The total for the greater Portland metro area, and we did this study with the Americans for the Arts, and it's called Arts and Economic Prosperity Study. And the last study was conducted in 2015. We were about to start a new one, and then COVID hit, and so we've had to table that for now. but the total industry expenditures in just the Portland metro area is over $330 million. And the number of full-time equivalent jobs supported by the cultural sector is 11,500 jobs. And in 2015, 4.7 million people attended arts and cultural activities in the state. And on average, excluding the cost of admission, attendees spent $25 every time they went to a cultural event on food or babysitter or parking or whatever into the local economy. And so the total expenditures by just audiences is $116 million from the sector. So as you can see, you get a sense of the economic impact of arts and culture in a year that was prior to COVID. And as you know, arts and cultural organizations, just about every single one of them provides public events or some aspect that the public attends or participates in or goes for a learning opportunity. So, the cultural expression and self-expression is highly valued, especially in the Portland area. The Cultural Trust and the Oregon Arts Commission are housed, within Business Oregon, which is the state's economic development department. And in May, they conducted a survey of all business sectors across the state in partnership with Travel Oregon and the Small Business Development Council. And what they found is that accommodation, hotels, etc., decline in revenue since April was 88% for accommodation. The next largest sector hit by COVID was arts, entertainment, and recreation, 82% loss of revenue. And then you move down into restaurants and bars and retail trade, healthcare, natural resources, etc. So you can see that, the arts, entertainment, and recreation sector was the second largest hit sector due to COVID. A typical cultural organization earns about 50% of their revenue from ticket sales, rental. Like, think about the Portland Art Museum and the number of ballrooms that they rent for wedding receptions or galas, et cetera. So all that revenue evaporated. And there's also a lot of services that cultural organizations provide. We were talking about education at the start of this meeting, and many cultural organizations provide services to schools for arts learning or cultural learning opportunities. It's a big part of what they do. And you think about an organization like Caldera or Young Audiences, or even the opera and the ballet and Disjecta. They all provide some sort of service to schools. And finally, another big thing that happened is many cultural organizations have galas that take place in the spring or this fall, which have of course been canceled. So a lot of revenue that is typically raised through galas has disappeared. So what that means is that without the earned revenue, organizations are in a position of business operation diminishing pretty rapidly. Contributed support has stayed to this point relatively even. And what we found, DeVos Institute did a study in the Portland Metro, and based on similar size cities, unfortunately in the Portland Metro, we're slightly below other case studies in terms of contributed support, individual support, corporate and foundation support. So there's a movement to try to build that up to at least comparable giving from the community. I think one of the big reasons that takes place is that in the Portland area and probably all over Oregon, there's a huge interest in environmental and social issues that people often give to at a great rate. So not that it's competitive, but just sort of it's the way we are. As you may know, we received from the legislature just shy of $26 million through the federal government, and the total package for arts and culture in the state was $50 million. And there were several direct grants made to large organizations like the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the Symphony, to Metro for the Portland 5 centers, and a couple other organizations. And then there were about 85, 90 organizations that received direct support because they operate a venue. And those were both profit and nonprofit venues. So, like the Crystal Ballroom, Aladdin, Doug Fir, Hawthorne Theater, etc., received direct line items. And then the remaining $26 million came to the Cultural Trust. And we've been working diligently to set up a program with a lot of input, of course, like 80%, 90% of the program is based on United States Treasury guidance. And then, of course, with the E-Board, the Emergency Board of the Legislature, we worked to put together a program concept, and the application process is open and closed. And we received to date 761 requests for support from across the state. And the fiscal size of those organizations that applied is $560 million. And the loss or request to us through the program is $93.7 million in request amounts. So $93.7 million that the cultural community has lost due to COVID. And we're going to do, obviously, our best to distribute that $26 million equitably across the state and help out as many organizations as possible. Some of the things that you probably have seen, not only with cultural organizations, but with all organizations, is a shift to providing programming in different formats, like online offerings, or there's oftentimes classes for kids that are held outside, far apart, or even for adults. Some organizations you can come by and pick up a box full of art supplies for you, your family, or your children to join online and watch a class and do it at home. And those boxes are relatively inexpensive or free to families that would not be able to afford them. So we see organizations really make a strong shift to thinking about things differently. But with performing arts, which is hit the hardest, they're really struggling with long term, like museums that are not interactive based have started to open in different formats. But performing arts organizations, in order to bring a full symphony on stage, it costs a lot of money, and you need to sell a lot of seats. Well, if you can only fill the auditorium, like let's say in December, you can only put a quarter of the number of people that were typically there, you see that it becomes a losing program that would actually lose money because you're not earning enough ticket sales. So I think, in the cultural sector, the organizations that are performing based are probably the hardest hit in all of this. And we actually, you can give me a time check whenever you want to, Ruth. I can't remember what time you wanted me to wrap up.
You have about 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay. We did a survey of organizations in May, and just want to kind of give you a sense of, you know, the other kinds of support out there and how it may or may not have helped cultural organizations. So in May, you know, when things really became abundantly obvious that this was going to be around for a while, we did a survey, and 330 organizations across the state applied or submitted responses to the survey. And projected revenue from March through June 30 for those organizations was 40 million. And the FTE, you know, the full-time equivalent staffing reduction was 1,400 jobs lost. And half the organizations of the 330 did not apply for the Paycheck Protection Program because they did not have paid employees, or the inability or reluctance to borrow. And of those who did apply for PPP support, only 10% said it was adequate to get them through June. So it kind of gives you a sense that you know, that program, as an example, was extremely competitive, and those that got it was sufficient, a very low number. The other thing too is that on average, cultural organizations have in reserve 2 to 3 months of operating support. And if you do the math, that's all gone by this point. And you know, and we've also been offering workshops on, you know, fully secured lines of credit. But again, a lot of people are very reluctant to borrow funds, especially without a clearer sense of what the future may hold. So I think, you know, I've talked to numerous executive directors of cultural organizations across the state, and you know, it's amazing that a lot of them have you know, the hope that they can come back in some form or another. A lot of them had to reduce, you know, pretty severely staff and different kinds of operating aspects to what they do. But there's optimism there that, you know, they truly believe what they do and the community is valued, that they're doing everything they can to continue to work with their audiences, their membership, to make sure that relationship maintains. And, you know, there's also a couple of capital construction projects going on. We run a program for capital construction as well, and that's during COVID has brought many challenges, because a lot of the final fundraising is from a couple of donors that, and I don't know if you've ever done fundraising, but a lot of that is a kind of a long-term relationship with somebody, and it's hard to build those relationships in a format like this to make those requests. So projects have been delayed or postponed for now. So I think is it okay, Ruth, if I pause there and see if we have any questions or thoughts?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And Maria, would you give us instructions again as to how to ask questions?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Brian. As I had just posted in the chat as a reminder, 2 ways to ask a question. One is to raise your electronic little blue hand. That is the raise hand feature in Zoom. And the other is just to message me saying, hey, call on me, I have a question. And so we're going to start today, Brian. Our first question actually came from our president. So President Ruth, why don't you kick us off with your first question?
Well, Brian, I'm on the board of the American Alliance of Museums, and AAM, which is the national group of of museums has done surveys and predicted that 30% of museums will not survive the pandemic, that we will lose almost a third of the museums nationwide. Are there any predictions in terms of the Oregon Arts Commission of how many organizations just won't make it at all? And what can we do to help stem that tide?
Yeah, important question. That we're starting, I think by the fall, we'll get a better sense of that. You know, I think many of you saw that World of Speed, which, you know, is a museum that collects cars, had to, you know, close and donate its collection to other institutions. And what we see with the larger museums is there's typically an endowment that's built over many, many, many years. And some museums may be able to access some of that to help get them through. But it's expensive to run a museum. You know, there's a lot of climate control issues. You can't shut the HVAC off. You know, that needs to run constantly. And also keep in mind that when you go into museum, you're typically looking at less than 10% of what the museum owns. That a lot of the holdings are held off-site in storage facilities. And those have to be maintained as well. So there's a lot of expenses behind the scenes that the most viewers don't ever think about or see. So in the last recession, the big recession, what we saw is that large organizations were typically able to survive because they were able to contract. They reduced staff, they reduced programming quality and quantity. Small organizations, you know, to be frank, they didn't have much to start with, so there wasn't much to lose, and they made it through. It's the mid-sized organizations that have the most difficult time because they can only contract so far before they have to close. And they can only reduce the quality and quantity of their programming so far before they lose audience interest. So it's those size organizations we worry about the most.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to call on Bob Yingling for the next question.
Yes, Brian, what sort of assistance are you providing to individual artists like local bands or other types of folks that make their living but aren't able to do that at this time?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. We are currently working on an artist relief program, cultural worker artist relief program. And we're working with a couple other funders in the state to kind of pull money together to fund artists with some degree of support to help them get through this. So it was one of those things that really came together fairly well for us. I don't want to get too specific because we're going to announce it as a group of funders, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag or anything like that. So, but keep an eye out for information about a program that we'll be administering that is funded by a couple other funders.
Thank you, Brian. And our next question comes from Delaney.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for your presentation. I know a lot of nonprofits, as you mentioned, that are cultural arts oriented have been really suffering during this time regarding funding. Typically, Oregon Cultural Arts, it's a grant situation where you fund specific projects. Are you going to be changing your funding model any different to be more of a shotgun approach, providing a little bit for more organizations?
Right, yeah, with the Oregon Arts Commission, we have 50% of our grant budget is for operating support, actually over 50%. And that funding is for whatever the organization needs to spend the money on, and it does provide them the flexibility. As far as our project support categories, the applications are down a little bit, but, many organizations have come into us. Actually, we received a lot of new project support applications. I think cultural organizations are really starting to think differently about the format of how they're going to implement those projects. And then we're just about to announce 19 arts learning awards to organizations to provide arts learning opportunities for K through 12 students. And again, a lot of them have shifted to online platforms, of course.
Thank you, Brian. Our next question comes from past President Kate Ertman.
Thank you, Brian, for being here today and talking with us on this topic. My question is regarding the criteria for how you are going to be distributing that 26 million that you have to distribute, though you have, what, more than three times as much request for that funding. If you're able to share how the heck you're going to make those decisions.
Yeah, it's been a lot of research and analysis of what the U.S. Treasury says the funds can and cannot be used for, which is pretty dense. And then we've also worked with the Department of Administrative Services. So we did a lot of research on essentially pulling out from U.S. Treasury guidelines the things that would be most applicable to cultural organizations. And the applicant has to demonstrate a clear impact of their work due to COVID-19. The specific, modifications to their venue. Did they have to pay for things to shift how the venue flows in terms of people visiting? We also looked at the interruption of business operations due to COVID-19 and the purchase of durable goods or services like hand sanitizing stations or personal protective equipment. So most organizations filled out a number for each one of those categories. Then we did a review internally, and we actually, because our staff is relatively small, we got help from the Oregon Water Enhancement Board. They sent over, they gave us a couple staff people to help us through it. They were running a very similar program for farmer relief. And then we received some help from folks at Business Oregon. So we did the initial review, sent out our recommendations to our county and tribal coalitions, and they sent back some more information, and we're doing the final review now. So there's been a number of different layers of review to each application, each 670 applications to get through. I keep saying that, in the best of all possible worlds, to put together a program to expend $26 million, we would probably want a year or 2 years to do it right, but we had a couple of months. So it's been like all hands on deck.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, just 670 applications. That's not too many to go through. Our next question comes from Corinne.
Hi, Brian. I run a performance venue, performing arts venue, and have recently joined a work group called REVS, which stands for Reopen Every Venue Safely. It's a local branch of this work group. I guess they're putting together some plans in major cities around the country. And I'm just curious if you have any examples of any venues around the state who have reopened successfully in some manner, or any sort of idea of a timeline for our Tri-County area for when you see, and I know it's hard to tell the future, but has there been discussion in the community around when does the next step come and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think, in general, without more guidance from the state and the federal government, a lot of the venues that I hear from are taking it slow. They're sort of waiting to see what they can do and when they can do it. You know, for example, the Four Rivers Cultural Center in Ontario, Oregon. You know, I know the executive director there pretty well, and their space is, you know, it's 67,000 square feet. It has a big auditorium and museum, meeting spaces, and they can open, and they are open, and they're desperately trying to get people to come there, and you know, safe distance and all that. But people are hesitant to do that, to go out into places where other people are. So I think it's a multi-layered thing. One is to get, you know, instructions from government about reopening venues, and the other is public confidence in attending things. So I think those two things kind of go hand in hand.
Brian, and with the final question, since I lead the Q&A, it gets to be me, and we don't have anybody else left in the queue, but I'd love to ask a question specifically about Southern Oregon and the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and if you know anything about what might need to be happening with that festival, any permanent changes or specifics about that one.
Yeah, I mean, our hearts go out to our friends down there. You know, they've been suffering over the last several years with smoke and people not coming at the rate they used to. They were exploring a number of different ways to retrofit the outdoor theater, you know, even ideas of a retractable roof and, you know, a lot of different things like that. So they were kind of in a tough spot prior to the fires, COVID and the fires. And the fire started, I guess, a little outside of Ashland and went directly north, up towards Medford. And as you may know, there's a town in between called Talent that was decimated. And the Shakespeare Festival has a state-of-the-art production facility there. If you ever get the opportunity, you should really go through it. It's just mind-boggling how wonderful it is. They have a huge costume design department, and they build all their sets there on site. That escaped the fires. It's a big metal building. All the facilities on campus were safe in Ashland. The thing that they talked about is at least 20 of their staff people had lost their houses in the fire. So I think the community down there is really struggling to figure out what's next. A lot of people who work at the Shakespeare Festival live outside of Ashland. You know, it's affordability, and we're impacted. So this is on top of them having to lay off, I think, over 150 people. Their typical payroll has about 300 people on it. So yeah, it's been pretty rough on them, but I think they're committed to making it through.
Brian, thank you so much for a sobering but ultimately hopeful presentation. I think all of us need to remember that artists are the voice and the conscience of society. We need their voices in this world at this trying time. And cultural performances are uplifting. They give us joy in an otherwise bleak existence. I want to thank you and the Oregon Arts Commission for everything you're doing to keeping our arts and culture organizations going. We will get to the other side. My own institution is one of the 761 proposals. And thank you for that heavy lift of distributing that money in such an equitable way. We are truly grateful.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good to see all of you.
So glad you could join us. Again, this meeting will be live via Zoom at noon next Tuesday. We had such a great presentation today, and our next week presentation is a surprise. Please stay tuned, check our website and spokes for the announcement. I didn't see any virtual guests today, but if you were here, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Maria, for our reflection today and for moderating the Q&A. Delaney, I so appreciate your introduction of Brian, and thank you again, Brian, both for your presentation and for your service to our state in supporting arts and culture. As we all enter into a new Rotary week, please join me in opening the doors of opportunity for healing, for recovery, and for peace building. As Rotarians, we are here to make our world healthier, more sustainable, and with justice for all. This meeting is adjourned.